So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for All Things Digital Pakistan webinar. Our guests today are Tania, Aidrus, and Khurram Jamali, the two architects of Digital Pakistan. Today's session is brought to you by Open Silicon Valley, and we're very fortunate to have Aidrus Kotari with us, who's one of our founding members. I am Farhan Yunus, and I'm the Secretary General of Open Silicon Valley. A few housekeeping rules to ensure that this session goes smoothly. First thing is, please keep your lines on mute. Please enter your location in the chat window wherever you're joining us from, so we know that. We will be taking question and answers, so please go ahead and type in your questions in the Q&A window, and we'll try to answer as many as we could. To stay informed about this seminar and all upcoming seminars, please go to our Facebook page of Open Silicon Valley. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, or you can just sign up on our website, opensv.org. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Aidrus Kotari. And Aidrus, all yours.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to host this session today. I met Tania and Khurram about a year ago, and I would not waste time reading their bios that you already have with you. I'll tell you things that are not in the bios. So I go to Pakistan and I meet these two young whippersnappers. And imagine, if you will, one day you're living in Singapore, you walk into your home, you tell your family, your spouse and your children, pack up. We're leaving, we're moving to Pakistan. I don't think most of the verbal patriots, as I am, we talk a lot about Pakistan, but most of us do not dare pack up our things and move to Pakistan. So hats off to people who actually put their family life and put their careers on the line to go help Pakistan. The other thing I noticed about this team, and there is a third person, Saad Tamman, who is slightly taller than I am, who actually called me out of the blue and said, we have received a letter from you to Imran Khan, or through someone to Imran Khan, advising us of all the help available from Silicon Valley and giving the names of all the executives who've done and techies that have done very well in Silicon Valley and how we can help you. And they said to work through this group, which Tania is heading right now. So that's my introduction to Tania and Khurram. And then I have visited Pakistan about 3 times in the last year and a half. And I've met them. They have a very interesting office in the secretariat where they have to make their own coffee and they bring their own food. And they treated us well. So Tania, welcome. Khurram, welcome. Hope your families are okay. Hope you guys are settling down in Pakistan well. Wish we could do, or I could do what you have done, but nonetheless, welcome. And please introduce yourself a little bit, talk about yourself maybe for a few minutes, things that I might have missed or that's not in the write-up and that I have not covered, then we'll get right into it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Aidrus, and thank you, Farhan, for inviting us today. And in many ways, Open is like family. I first got introduced to Open probably about 16, 18 years ago when I lived in DC. And I worked very closely with a group of people in DC to actually help launch the DC chapter, and then moved to Boston and was pretty closely involved with the Boston chapter as well. So I've been very, very intimately familiar with the work that Open has done, and this is a group that I sort of consider not only old friends, but very much home ground. So funnily enough, Idris has forgot to mention that we first met in the Bay Area, where I think I may have reached out randomly because a bunch of different people had said, if you're trying to do something in Pakistan, you have to talk to this guy called Idris. And so I reached out, and we ended up having very detailed, long discussion where we individually shared our stories. And Idris had far more war stories to share at that time. I can say I might have slightly more war stories in the last few months from having been on the ground, but we've stayed in touch, and he's been just a huge source of support and help over the past many months as we've made the transition. So I'll spend a couple of minutes on just the story, I suppose, because I think that's something that doesn't come out in bios. But my preference is to not talk very much during the session and sort of hear what's on your minds and try to answer as many questions as possible. So look, I mean, very quickly, I spent about 14 years in the US. I'm from Karachi originally. Did sort of undergrad, grad school in Boston. Did a health tech startup for a little while. Did consulting for a few out of the Boston office. Ended up moving to Singapore when I got an opportunity to sort of start looking more deeply at this part of the world. Moved to Singapore about 7 years ago. Sort of started the what we call the South Asia frontier business at Google, which was basically South Asia minus India. Did that for a few years, launched a bunch of products here, did a bunch of localization, had a ton of fun, got to know the startup ecosystem in Pakistan, built some fantastic relationships. And I think throughout that time, felt like while I was getting closer to Pakistan in the sense that I was spending more and more of my time working on it, it still didn't feel close enough. Every time I took the flight back to Singapore, it was this feeling of like, I really should be here and doing more, being in the epicenter of things. And then I suppose last year, it was right around this time last year where the person that Idris just mentioned, Saad Taman, who's a member of the Prime Minister's reform team, he reached out and basically said, look, we've gotten your name and we want to talk to you about tech. And so I was like, okay, happy to chat, and got on a call with him, which turned into a very long call and turned into many calls. And, a month later, he and a number of other people had sort of convinced me to come visit Islamabad. And so I showed up actually with Khurram. Khurram and I have also known each other for many years, both at Google, but also pre-Google, from a time when we lived in DC together, and sort of used to volunteer for various Pakistan-related things. So anyway, we showed up, being told that you need to go present to the Prime Minister what your ideas are around what tech can do for Pakistan's future. So it was literally as vague a statement as that. So we sort of like brainstormed and put a bunch of ideas down. And actually, Khurram will walk you through some of what we presented to the PM about a year ago. And so we showed up, like got an opportunity to sit with a bunch of cabinet members, including the PM. Talked about what we thought needed to happen, and as complete outsiders, not really knowing what the situation on the ground was. I think that tends to happen to many of us, where we think we can solve Pakistan's problems. And of course, little did we know that it would take far more than, fancy deck and a couple of great ideas. But many months later, lots of conversations later, lots of convincing, both, me convincing myself, me convincing my family. We have 4 young kids under the age of 10 who are actually happen to be stuck in Singapore right now. They're in the process of moving to Islamabad, but hopefully once flights start back up, they'll be here. But it was a tough decision. We had been out for 20 years, and both of us had careers, but we also felt like I'm one of those no regrets people. So sort of felt like it was going to be now or never, and I should either jump in now and stop having the drawing room conversations and complaining about why things aren't going in the direction they should, and give it a shot. And frankly, like, even if I get nothing done, I'll at least know that I tried, and I can potentially get a job again somewhere, and I'll be fine. So I think there was this sort of level of conviction that got developed over the period of many months as I started engaging with the Pakistan government here, where it felt like, ultimately we many of us have tried to help from the outside, but the types of things that often need to be fixed, whether it's at the policy level or even if you think about building infrastructure, it's incredibly hard to expect that to happen with the sort of human resource that frankly exists in the government. And there are lots of reasons for that, and we can get into that later in Q&A. But really, the driving factor here was, we have resumes that we can fall back on. Ultimately, if we don't bring enough of us together to try and tackle some of the big things that we think need to be tackled, then we can't be pointing fingers at anyone and saying, hey, why didn't you do what you were supposed to do? So there's sort of like a little bit like crazy, which, I've been called all kinds of things, from crazy to having a midlife crisis to, destroying my career and my husband's career, and now lots of other people's careers who are jumping in. But I can tell you, sort of before I jump off and pass off to Khurram, that I have now been here full time since December. And sort of before that, for a few months, I was doing back and forth, so a week here and a week back in Singapore. And I can tell you that there hasn't been a single day where I have regretted the decision to do this. There have been some incredibly, incredibly difficult days. There have been days where I've wanted to just scream and pull my hair out. And those days happen very regularly. And I think I've had the steepest learning curve I've had in my life, learning political navigation, learning the bureaucracy, figuring out how to get help without too many resources at hand. But the feeling of regret is absolutely not there. I think that is, I realize that's something that at least I was trying to optimize for, very, very deeply. And, again, we're in month 4 right now. There's lots going on, and we'll talk you through a few of the initiatives that are on their way. Some have happened, some are in planning mode. But again, thank you for having us. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to you and answer your questions. So with that, I'll turn over to Khurram, and Khurram, please don't share too many war stories.
Thanks. Thank you, Tanya. And hi, Farhan and Aidrus. Thank you for the very kind introductions. To jump on the bandwagon with Tanya officially. Just quit at Google a month or so ago, and now in Islamabad. Families made it to Karachi, not to Islamabad yet, but hopefully between flights and school and whatnot, we'll also figure it out. A little bit of background myself as well. So I'm originally from Karachi, like Tanya. I ended up actually moving to the US for college, and studied a bunch of things: economics, computer science, Mandarin. And when I actually went to the US, I honestly had no intention of ever returning to Pakistan, right? Through conversations with people, through conversations with mentors, one big realization was that one of the biggest problems that Pakistan faces is actually the brain drain. Where people go overseas and they actually never come back. And, we've got fantastic people like Aidrus, who's done amazing things. He's done them in the US. I'm picking on you, Aidrus, but you clearly, you're one of the few who's still connected to Pakistan and trying to give back wherever you can. And there are lots of people like that. So at the time, I sort of made that decision that, wherever I am, I want to be one of those people who remains connected to Pakistan in some way, shape, or form, wherever I may be. And I ended up doing consulting in the US for about 3 or 4 years after college. And actually, I was in DC when I first met Tanya. And this is like 2005 when we had this earthquake in northern Pakistan. And at the time, apart from my day job, I was the treasurer of this NGO called Association for the Development of Pakistan, a bunch of people who were working at Bain at the time, had started it, and so I was the treasurer there. And for the earthquake, we actually created something called the South Asia Quake Alliance, where all these different NGOs and entities sort of came working together. I think, Tania, if I'm not wrong, you were representing Open at the time, correct? So I guess it's Open can be thanked for bringing us together way back when. And so that's how we initially met in 2005, and did a bunch of talks, a bunch of discussions on how we can help with fundraising for Pakistan. And then we sort of went our different ways. And I ended up spending a few more years in the US, then actually spent about 5 years in China, and then moved to Singapore to go for my MBA at INSEAD. And then was in Malaysia for an internship with an e-commerce venture incubator. And it's just crazy how the world works. The person I was interning with, went to grad school with Tania in Boston, and was trying to get me to convince Tania to join him to start up stuff in Pakistan. So interestingly, it was again Pakistan that reconnected us. Tania ended up convincing me to join her at Google and kickstart the team for Pakistan, a bunch of other emerging markets. And this was in late 2013. And so since then, we had a bunch of war stories that I'm not going to get into at this point. But I guess what's important here is that the thing that sort of bound Tania and me together really was Pakistan and the passion to drive change. And I've been called things similar to Tania. I'm crazy for like what I want to do in Pakistan. But one person's crazy. Two people together, yeah, we hatch ideas. And so I think once Tania and I started talking and started seeing that we think very similarly about what we want to do for Pakistan, that really made me feel at least that maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe there are things that we can manage to achieve in Pakistan. And so I'd actually left Google to do a startup in the payment space, and I joined back to work on public sector digital infrastructure, which is something that's really exciting and ongoing globally, but also in Pakistan, because we have a bunch of different pieces. And that's really where we sort of started thinking about how, when the whole thing with the PM happened, we started thinking about really what is it that we want to solve to really get Pakistan to accelerate its digitization and growth. And I think what we really, since we have a fair amount of time, I'd love to actually take everyone through a bulk of what we presented to the Prime Minister, almost a year ago. Then what I'll do is we can fast forward to where we stand today and what we've been up to in the last few months since sort of formalizing the structure. And then we can talk about where we're going. So with that, let me just try to share my screen.
And Aidrus, tell us to shut up at any point if we're taking too much time away from Q&A.
Oh, no, this is your show. I think we want to hear even more. So let's get through this presentation, and then we'll start the fireworks.
Okay.
Wait, can you guys see my screen in the presentation?
Not me, not Aidrus.
Tania, Farhan, can you guys?
No, Khurram. Are you sharing your screen?
I thought I was. 1 second. Okay.
Please bear with us. Presentation is coming.
Okay, what about now?
Yeah,
it's coming.
Says it started sharing, so should be up.
It says started screen sharing, but we can't see anything.
It might take a minute or so because there's so many people logged in. It's got to go through everything.
Okay, there.
Yep.
Okay, we see it now, but in present mode. Let's see.
Whoa, my Zoom might be crashing. 1 second. It's not in present mode?
No, yeah, it's not in present mode, but we can see your screen now. Yeah, okay. Now
there you go. Much better.
Okay. I think there's a bit of a lag, but please let me know if I kind of get ahead of the presentation. So as I said, most of this, at least the first part, is almost exactly what Tania presented to the Prime Minister and the President and the Cabinet in sort of her first interactions. We thought it'd be useful for her to see how at least we were thinking about the journey of actually digitizing Pakistan and how we want to think through it now and in the future. And we really started with the fact that Pakistan's actually missed out on a bunch of potential investment. Folks, can you still see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Keep getting. Okay, cool. We missed out on a bunch of investment. If you actually look at what's happened in Asia through VCs, we could have actually had about $8 billion in investment that we didn't get. And that's despite the fact that we've got a fantastic base in terms of smartphone users, really low data cost compared to other countries, and a young digital ready population. But really, when you look at VC investment coming in compared to the size of Pakistan, we're actually very, very much at the bottom of the pile, even below countries that have a lower sort of global entrepreneurship and development ranking than us, such as Bangladesh, and by a fair amount as well. And while we have our problems, what we see is that most of these problems are actually ones that have been solved elsewhere. So our first hypothesis was like, look, we don't need to reinvent the wheel if we're really going to start Pakistan on the journey of digitization. We really just need to look at what best-in-class countries have done for different problems. And I'll give you guys some examples, but not everything that we've gone through. And I think one example that really stood out to us on the tech side was Vietnam, which in the last 15 or 10 to 15 years has gone from just another player to one of the biggest exporters of ICT. So not only have they quadrupled, ICT as a share of their exports, but their entire export base has also gone up dramatically. So massive change in terms of a player on the ICT side globally. And now 31% of their exports are related to ICT, whereas Pakistan, as you can see, we've been pretty consistently average. And with half the population of Pakistan now, Vietnam actually has 20 times the ICT exports of Pakistan. I'm not going to talk here about the different reasons that this has happened, but these are areas or interventions that Pakistan can actually also undertake. A couple of other examples: tax. We talk all the time. Yeah.
Khurram, may I request you to explain ICT? Somebody asked, what is ICT?
Okay, ICT is broadly, it's about basically communications and technology, right? It's an area or component of your GDP that is related to technology-related fields. So think about integrated circuits, think about communications technology, think about computers, think about smartphones, think about hardware related to smartphones or broadband networks, etc. And it also has a pretty significant component on just tech skills as well. So it's a broad-based measure to assess your ability to compete on the global scale vis-a-vis technology. Thanks, Aidrus, for pointing that out. I can't see the questions, by the way, so please feel free to interrupt if there are other ones that I need to sort of cover. All right, I saw my tax, and here's another field that we for a long time have been talking about Pakistan's tax collections, and we have some interesting examples. A country like Georgia that has gone from being way worse than Pakistan to be sort of the gold standard in tax collection. And again, what they've done is not something that's completely unheard of, but they've just got together an interesting set of policies to really transform tax collection. And now they're actually collecting 31 times the tax Pakistan is on a per capita basis, even though their GDP per capita is about 2.5x of Pakistan. And these are measures that we've sort of started taking. You look at e-filing, for example. It's something we have in Pakistan, technically speaking. But if anyone on this call has actually tried filing for taxes in Pakistan digitally, I consider myself digitally savvy. I had to hire someone to actually file for me because it's the program is not actually built in a user-centric way at all. So really the details in these things really, really matter. The third piece, and the one that was most striking for us, is actually transforming financial inclusion. Considering our background, Tanya and I have spent a fair amount of time looking at digital infrastructure, particularly payments. And we were amazed to see what India has actually achieved in the last 5 to 8 years, where they've completely transformed the number of banked people in Pakistan. And whereas Pakistan's done reasonably well, when you actually compare it to other countries, we are still lagging severely behind. And when you actually look at what India did, this entire list of things are things that Pakistan sector has tried to actually execute on. So the question is really what is different? And to us, this piece is actually one of the key pieces of actually transforming Pakistan on the digital side. And that's, we have to fundamentally move from a thought process of creating, the government creating digital products for the users and for government to use, to the government creating APIs to allow the private sector and other developers and startups to actually work on developing solutions for the users. Now, I'm sure someone might ask what APIs are. You can think of APIs as the strings that allow one big database to actually connect and data from that to be connected and used by other products and players. What that essentially means is, if I take the tax example that I just gave you, whereas in Pakistan, we have actually set up an e-filing tax system that has been built by someone in or related to government. If you go to the US, for example, the US tax system is still owned and operated by the government, but you have all these private players that are creating solutions that link to that system and actually allow you to file your taxes through a private sector player. So that's the fundamental difference that we're talking about, and that's the thing that India over the last 7 to 8 years really identified, and in the process also identified 3 or 4 critical areas of digital infrastructure that needs to be built to achieve that end goal. Those 4, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We can, there's a lot of literature available online, but it's about creating a wholly digital identity using biometrics and other measures, actually having the ability to control that identity online so that data can move freely and securely. Moving records to paperless. Again, there are a lot of institutions and companies in Pakistan that claim to be paperless, but they really aren't when you actually get to the bottom of it. And the 4th piece, which in this COVID-19 world is starting out to be pretty important, is actually going to digital payments as opposed to cash. And in India's case, they actually spent a better part of half a decade working through creating the digital infrastructure for it. Comparing this to Pakistan, in 2002, Pakistan had already created Nadra, which is, to date, it is one of the best ID systems in the world, period. To date, when you talk about, World Bank's ID for D programs that talk about how other countries have solved for ID, they use Nadra as an example. So we started that in 2002. And then by 2010, I believe we added 2012, we added the smart chip option. But the problem is we've still not integrated that into all the other layers of digital payments or digital infrastructure, like payments, like e-signing. So for example, in 2015, India created the e-signing, digital signing initiative, linked that to Aadhaar. Guess what? In 2002, Pakistan had passed an electronics transaction ordinance and created an entity that was supposed to create, link up digital signing. That exists in Pakistan. It's just not linked to Nadra. Digital payments technically exist in Pakistan. OneLink was ahead of its time. It's just not directly linked to Nadra or to the digital signing system. So we're in an interesting place where we have a bunch of the pieces that we really need to fully transform the digital ecosystem of Pakistan, but they all sort of exist in silos. And really that was the main message that Tania gave to the PM, that we have lots of different pieces in silos, and nobody is really thinking about how to overarchingly connect these and make sure that we build value through all of them for the citizens of Pakistan. Anyway, so India's done really well because of their digital infrastructure in the last few years. And the question then was really, how can we, on the Pakistan side, make it happen? And we talked to the government about really setting up a clear vision, giving the right empowerment, the right mandate, allow them to actually identity being the core center point of any work that we do. And it was, I'll talk about the stuff we're working on right now, but going back and looking at this presentation is interesting to see that, of course, financial services I just talked about, government services is a no-brainer. But we also talked about how healthcare and education would be very interesting areas in the medium term to digitize for the benefit of the country. And we talked about linking all sorts of different data silos through one layer that sort of connects all of them to Nadra and allows the seamless sort of interflow of data. And this to us still seems to be the most important thing that we need to achieve as Digital Pakistan over the next few years, inshallah. But fast forward to December of last year, and Tania had this event that I'm sure a lot of you actually saw, where we talked about the 5 priorities that we built up from the work that we had done till that time on what Pakistan should go after. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because then a few months later, after, Tania, when was it that you actually got formally notified, by the way?
I think it was actually after the first COVID case. So it was February 28th. So I think a little other part of the story that's potentially interesting to know is that when we went up and announced Digital Pakistan, there really wasn't anything there. There wasn't a role for me. There wasn't an organization. There wasn't really anything formal. So it took about 3 months to actually formalize my role, which really only, in the government you call it a notification, but you have to get notified as a, whatever the role might be. So it was the last day of February, and I actually had set a deadline of end of February for myself, saying if they still don't do this, that really must be a signal that this is going to be me hitting my head on the wall. But fortunately, I did manage to get notified as what's called a special assistant to the Prime Minister on Digital Pakistan, which sort of gave this a far more legitimacy than it had in December when we had gone and sort of announced this on stage. So again, a little known story, but just to give you guys a sense of the timelines and just how things move in the government.
Thanks, Tania. So Feb 28th, finally notified, ready to go. By the way, till that point, Tania was on my case to also join her, and I was like, "You haven't been notified yet. What am I going to do if I actually show up?" So we'd have lots of arguments and fights about how we're going to pull this off and when and where. And then she got notified, but then this guy happened. A symbol or sign that I bet 3 months ago nobody would have any idea what this is, but I think everybody knows what the coronavirus now is, and particularly COVID-19. I'd actually, I decided I was going to do what I was going to do, and it was the right time to move from, being sort of linked to Pakistan and being overseas to actually being with Tania on the ground and really figuring out what we can do to make a difference, or whether we can or can't. And similar to her, no real downside of failure. If we fail, we felt comfortable that we can sort of get back on the corporate side, but we had to really give it a shot. And COVID-19 actually didn't change anything. In fact, if anything, what that made us realize is that, this is probably a critical time where a lot of different things need to happen within government. And we weren't so sure that, all the pieces that needed to move would move. And so we had 2 choices here. One was to continue with the mandate that we had talked about the 5 areas and really focus on them and building, starting to build on Pakistan's infrastructure, or really pivot and start thinking about what role digital needs to play in tackling the COVID-19 crisis across Pakistan. And it was in its infancy when we just decided, look, we need to focus all our energies on figuring out how to tackle this, and everything else is secondary at this in this moment in time. And so that's what we did. And what I'll do is I'll just run you folks through some of the stuff and some of the stories of what we've been up to in the last month, month and a half. One of the first things that we realized is that there was no digital data flow from the front lines, which is the labs that we're testing and the hospitals that we're testing, to the provincial and federal governments. And what that really means is that you had technically a digital flow. I mean, sending like a situation report over WhatsApp is technically digital, but you actually did not have a live flow. And so we realized, we have this window of time where we can actually look at fully digitizing and automating the data collection process from COVID-19 patients to the federal and provincial governments. And so that's the first thing we went all in on. And, we did an assessment and worked really closely with the health ministry and a bunch of other ministries and planning, et cetera, to understand, what are the options. And one of the conclusions we drew was that in wartime, you don't actually go and reinvent the wheel. You really try to use the best assets that you have. The best asset that we actually have here in Pakistan for data collection is actually the polio surveillance system that has been set up over the last few years. And so what we decided was to work with the Emergency Operations Center, EOC, which is the Polio Operations Center. And we co-opted their digital infrastructure and sort of repurposed it for COVID-19 data collection. And so a new sort of subsystem was built into it. And then we spent a lot of time actually working with the labs and the hospitals and the provincial governments to get everybody on board to start collecting and entering data into that system. We also then, there were each province, or some of the provinces at least, had their own DSSs, which are disease surveillance systems. And so we worked on actually integrating via APIs that I'd mentioned earlier, the central system with the provincial systems. And so, at this point, nearly all the cases that we have in Pakistan, either suspected or confirmed or unfortunately deaths, are actually flowing through one database. And what that allows provinces and the national government to do is, have their finger on the pulse and actually make good, decisions at any given time as to what the next step should be. The COVID-19 response, I mean, it's literally every day one has to assess where you're standing, what you need to do. So this data accuracy is incredibly key for it. The second thing we noticed, 1166, which was a helpline for polio again, had already been co-opted into answering any COVID-19 related questions, except for the 220 million people of Pakistan, we had 30 agents that were, answering all the calls. And on every sort of piece of government information that went out, 1166 was being mentioned as, if you have any questions, contact 1166. Now, it was incredibly important to ensure that 1166 was responsive, because what we realized is anybody who sort of contacted 1166 and was unable to get through would then go to a hospital. And one of the most important pieces in the COVID-19 response is to ensure that your hospital capacity is adequately utilized and not unnecessarily overburdened. So we sort of immediately started working with the World Health Organization, UNICEF, polio, and the health ministry were all involved in 1166 to making sure that we increase the number of agents. We're now sitting at about 250 agents. And we've gone from about 50 lines to about, I believe at last count, 300 or 400 lines, so that now nearly all the capacity of calls coming in can be addressed. And we've also set up sort of automated voice systems in multiple languages. These are going live over the next week or so, to allow a lot of the demand incoming calls to be tackled directly without needing to even engage an agent. And staying on the communication space, we wanted to focus on other ways that people may want to get information. Again, the real focus being, how do we ensure people don't need to actually show up at a hospital or insist on a test when there aren't enough tests? And we set up a couple of bot helplines where you could actually do automated tests, just answer a few questions and at least get some clarity as to whether you are at high risk for COVID-19 or medium or low risk, and accordingly sort of control the demand of going towards hospitals. And we were pretty happy to see there's a fair amount of engagement. So about almost 500,000 Pakistanis, 300, 400,000 Pakistanis used these helplines and exchanged almost 8 million messages with them. So meaning that multiple messages have been exchanged over time. Then the question was, how do we get to the masses, right? Like, what if people haven't called 1166? What if they don't have Facebook or WhatsApp? How do we make sure they get minimal information? So we actually went out and had one of our, we have lots of volunteer partners. One of them actually recorded these tones that I'm sure everybody who's at least in Pakistan right now and dialed on has heard. And hopefully you're not by now too irritated by them. We've actually updated those ringtones once already, so they change up. But really, it's important for the people that might not otherwise have access to information to understand what they need to do to respond to COVID-19. So that's what the ringtones were for. And then starting to plan for the medium to long term, our analysis showed that some of the key things that we need to plan for is actually available equipment at hospitals. Ventilators is a key gating factor on whether the fight against COVID-19 is going to result in a fairly low mortality rate or a higher mortality rate. And so we actually worked with Dr. Faisal Sultan and his team to really build a data set on what the availability is across the country. And maybe Tania, you can talk a little bit more about that. And
I was just going to mention here, just for context, when we started to figure out how we would answer these questions, there was nobody in the country that had a line listing of the number of hospitals that exist, the number of beds that exist, the number of ICU beds, the number of ventilators. Like, there was actually no accurate count, which again, as an objective third party is a little bit like hard to understand, but it was almost impossible to even get to planning when sort of the baseline didn't exist. So it's taken us many weeks to actually, there were literally situations, and again, this is one of those where you realize that technology is really only an enabler. We had to literally deploy people to sit and call hospitals. Like, that's sort of how down to the level of detail we had to get to. The good news, I think, out of that exercise now is we have a good sense of the 450 hospitals that exist around the country by province. We have a good sense of how many ventilators each of them have, and that's sort of become a little bit of a baseline for how we're doing planning, particularly for things like vents. We still don't have a great handle on things like healthcare workers, etc. I mean, we understand this stuff in pockets, but as you can imagine, just if the baseline doesn't exist, it's pretty hard to go out and do that. So while I think we often get asked, like, what is happening and what is being done and why is response the way it is, and I think this is just to give you a sense of the actual on the ground situation that existed literally a month and a half ago. And then I think, Khurram, you're going to talk about modeling, and then we'll get into some of the other sort of COVID and non-COVID related things that we're working on right now.
Yeah, sure. So very quickly on modeling, that's a piece that, again, is very, very much reliant on the data flowing in. So once we actually got the data flow sorted, what we were able to do was build these predictive models, and we sort of built multiple types, right? If you look at how COVID-19 can be modeled for, and there's one term in particular that's really important, which is called the R naught, and the R naught is basically the reproductive rate of a virus, and so either you can take that as a given, or you can actually sort of model to build what an R naught is based on the data, and one is an econometric type of model, and the other is like a predictive learning AI-based model, and we sort of built both of those. And separately, again, with Dr. Faisal Sultan and his team of epidemiologists, we built some epidemiological models. And between those three, sort of developed a range of outcomes that we might face at any given time based on the level of lockdowns that are ongoing in different provinces and across the country. And that's proved very, very useful. I know we talk a fair amount about the government's response to this to COVID-19, but if you actually look at where we stand compared to other countries, knock on wood, we're actually, just the fact that we still have linear sort of growth in infections and deaths as opposed to exponential means we're ahead of most countries. And again, knock on wood, because this is a long-term battle, but our models have really helped us in defining the strategies that can be used. Tania, perhaps let me talk about telehealth, and then you can talk about the other initiatives. On telehealth, we talked earlier about 1166 and the bots. A lot of times people just need to talk to a health practitioner, and they actually don't have or don't want to actually go to a hospital. So the other thing we did is, really relied on the private sector to step up and provide these services in this time of need. And at least on the startup side, the private sector really has stepped up. A bunch of startups actually signed MOUs with us and provided free of cost consultation through sort of either phone or online video apps to potential patients of COVID-19. And that's another way we were able to take off some of the load from the healthcare sector of Pakistan. We have some more partnerships in the pipeline, and in most cases, really the requirement is that people are keen on doing something for the citizens at this time, and there are lots of companies that are willing to do that. Tanya, you want to talk about the travel strategy?
So I think part of what happened when we sort of jumped into this whole COVID thing was that there were questions that were coming up that, frankly, really no one had any answers to. And, one of them was, what should we be doing with incoming passengers? What should we be doing with flights, first of all? And then what should we be doing with passengers? And I think this is something that every country is tackling right now. And we've gone through a series of policy changes. We're currently at a stage where we are bringing in stranded passengers from stranded Pakistanis from a number of different countries. The policy currently states that we will test everybody who enters the country, and then we will quarantine them while the test result comes out, etc. And so when it got to that point, obviously it's very clear that that's not a scalable strategy. It works for a few flights coming in here and there, and to bring stranded Pakistanis back. But once you start to open up commercial flights again, we can't be sitting and testing everyone and putting them in quarantines that the government pays for and then covers, and it just frankly isn't going to scale. And as we looked at what other countries were doing and how they were using tech to see how they were actually applying things like 14-day stay-at-home notices, and then actually moving towards strict compliance of those notices. So we spent a bunch of time coming up with what you may have heard being called the TTQ approach that is currently rolling out here. So TTQ basically stands for trace, test, and quarantine. And really what this comes down to is we need to understand beyond just the confirmed cases that we're getting, which are largely diagnostic. So people are coming in and getting tested and we know that they're positive. And that's sort of the information we have right now. How do we start to broaden that base so that we can actually start to not only do disease surveillance in the masses, but also do better contact tracing, using a number of different mechanisms so that we could see who could potentially be at risk, and then who is the who are the set of people that we should be proactively testing. And ultimately, I mean, and again, many of you have seen these numbers. Our testing rates per million were very, very low in the beginning. We are rapidly increasing them, but also now starting to think about what are the other types of testing we should be doing. And so there's a bunch of time spent on that, again, trying to figure out how can we use tech to help make a lot of this, whether it's how you do quarantining more effectively and with far more compliance. So similar to what countries like Singapore have done, etc. Is that even possible in a place like Pakistan? How do we do better contact tracing? So we spent a bunch of time working with the intelligence agencies who have access to both NADRA and family tree information, but also some telco data to see how we can actually understand who a person who's now confirmed COVID positive, who else could they have come in touch with. And Khurram, if you build up, the other couple of things that have happened that are non-health related, interestingly enough during this time are, and again, this is something that had been on our roadmap and on our list of things to do. But one of those areas was education. We already have 18 million children out of school in Pakistan, and the other millions that were in school are now also out of school. And frankly, with the exception of the very small number of private schools that have access to things like Google Classroom, the majority of the kids are now sitting at home and have been since we went into lockdown end of March. We're now entering the summer period, and frankly, it's very unclear what's going to happen in August. And again, this is something this is not a Pakistan-specific problem. This is something everyone is tackling globally. So we started actually getting quite engaged with the education ministry to figure out what are some things that we could do to help them bring the best content that's available in the private sector. So rather than having the government get into the business of creating educational content, what can we do to actually partner with private sector content providers in English, Urdu, and then hopefully over time in regional languages as well. Take that content, map it back down to the Pakistani curriculum, and then make it available in as many ways as possible. So that's been something that we've now gotten deeply involved with. We've also, interestingly enough, started to make some traction with the law ministry. And again, I think what we've noticed is in the last 5 or 6 weeks, there's been this sudden mindset shift in a number of ministries in the government, where I think not only are people getting used to a new way of just operating and doing things and existing, I think there's a lot of realization that unless we really move to doing things differently now, this is a new world order and we have to learn how to live in it. So these are just some examples of things that we've gotten pulled into recently. And just again, to be completely honest, the big struggle for us right now, and I'll stop talking after this and move over to Q&A, is that we're currently a team with, I think we mentioned, it's been 6 weeks since I got notified. We have 0 resources. We have line of sight to funding, but the funding hasn't arrived yet. So pretty much everything we've talked about to date has been done, without really any money being spent, and has all been done on volunteer time. And obviously that is something that is, as we start to get pulled into more and more, the pipeline of volunteers, while it's been phenomenal, is just incredibly hard to keep a track of, and particularly as you realize that you need certain types of people for certain types of things. So we find ourselves in a situation where the demand and the need for help on brainstorming and sort of getting various verticals in the government to think differently and to think about how digital can actually help step change their particular area, all the way from, as I said, like education, health, law, agriculture. PIEA is thinking about this now after many, many years. But so we find ourselves in this sort of dilemma where, we're sort of getting stretched in lots of different directions, and we're certainly trying to keep our head above water, but incredible focus and delivery is very, very important right now, just to avoid not only burnout, but also to ensure that we're showing clear delivery and sort of continuing to build the momentum. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking now, Aidrus. I know we've taken a ton of time, but I think, but we can potentially move over to Q&A, and unless you have any questions that you'd like for us to answer.
Before
Yes.
that, Tania, Idris, if I can just add one line here. I think I want to talk a little bit about the way we've set ourselves up by, between what we're doing in government, what we're doing in the private sector. So we have Tania leading sort of the Digital Pakistan team within the Prime Minister's office, which is a light team. And then we built the Digital Pakistan Foundation, which is a not-for-profit, and which is going to be funded by private sector grants. And like Tania said, we have line of sight for grants. Now, this is a very sort of active decision on our part. We sort of faced two options here, right? We could go heavy within government and actually try to get funding from the government for it. But we felt that was actually, any dollar, every rupee that we spent on this initiative was a rupee we'd have to pay back as citizens of Pakistan. So insofar as we can actually pull this off with private sector grants, because there are lots of entities that are interested in supporting digitization of economies, we feel that is a better way to do it. So I just want to say it's a very active decision to structure it in that way. And that also allows us then to bring quality talent back to Pakistan and contribute through this structure of the Digital Pakistan Foundation. So just want to add there. Over to you, Idris.
All right. Thank you very much, both of you. Definitely a lot of food for thought. A whole bunch of questions have come in. I'll go through a couple of my questions, and then we'll let Farhan manage which ones he wants to pass on. My question is, I'm sure being Pakistanis, we all know how to do your job better, and we can tell you what you should do. Could you tell us how we, without sitting outside and not having the ability to be in Pakistan, how can we help? How can we coordinate so we don't become a team of 11 players rather than a superstar team of 11 rather than 11 individual players? There are a lot of well-intentioned and highly bright Pakistanis around the globe who all want to help. Is there any way we could create a central website or something where we could all volunteer and at least create a database so you know who we are, what we want to do, what our capabilities are, and it'll create an effective team, if you will, around the globe?
So Tania, I'll share my 2 cents and would love to hear yours as well. Idris, spot on. I think it's incredibly important for all of us, no matter where we are, to figure out how we can contribute to this and other nation-building initiatives. And what you're talking about is something that was on our early to-do list before this entire COVID-19 pivot that we're undergoing. But having said that, I think to me there are 2 things here. One is there's, like you said, there's lots of well-meaning people that want to contribute, but there has to be a minimum bar of time and effort that one needs to provide, because anything below that, just the time it takes to ramp up, it's detrimental to a small team of like 8 or 9 or 10 people that we are at right now. But there have been some outstanding contributions already. And just Shiba Najmi, who's in the US, comes to mind, who's spent a lot of time. She's actually the person who set up Code for Pakistan, and she's been volunteering a fair amount of her time, but consistently, right? And that's the key. So if you're going to be outside and try to contribute, I think it's important to figure out at least 15 to 20 hours a week that you can contribute to this initiative, because anything below that, I don't think there's any shortage of thought leadership, if I'm being honest, between the people that are already contributing and the network, and people like yourself, Idris. So in the short term, that's one ask. In the long term, I think I would love to see more people actually seriously consider coming back to Pakistan and contributing to this initiative. And we're undertaking some very interesting structures to make that happen. So, what we're setting up in Islamabad is something akin to hacker houses, so if someone wants to come take a 2-month or a 3-month sabbatical from their job and a place to live, food to eat, people to take, a car to get them around, we'll take care of all of that. And all you need to do is, commit, interview and hopefully show up and we can do some pretty cool stuff together. Tania, feel free to add.
No, I mean, look, I think it's something that I'll be honest, I have probably failed to do enough of, Idris. And I think part of it is just been, this sort of balance between trying to learn what needs to be learned here to be effective, and frankly, every day is a huge steep learning curve, and reaching out for help on specific areas. Also, the type of help that's needed at a given point in time is different. But I think the thing that Khurram said that really resonates with me is what we need help on is execution on the ground. And I realize that that's an incredibly difficult ask of this group, because having been on the other side for many years, it's hard to sort of be sitting 10,000 miles away and figuring out how you can help on execution. But we have actually had there are people who have been sitting in the US and looking over and helping draft PRDs and working with engineering teams. Actually volunteering their time over many hours. Again, I think what you're saying is how do you do this in a programmatic way? I think creating a central sort of mechanism for people to raise their hand and say, hey, this is what I can do and this is what I can help with is definitely a good starting point. I will take that as an action item to do a better job of that. I know there was an overseas Pakistani database that was created a couple of years ago, and frankly, even looking at that as a starting point may be a good place to start. I don't know how many of you signed up to that, but rather than asking people to resubmit information, etc., which I'd hate to do, but that may be a place that we need to start looking at first.
All right. Last time we met 6 weeks ago, it was a different world, right? You cannot go to chai khanas anymore, and you cannot go out and volunteer, and you cannot show up unless you get tested. That said, I think a lot of us have presence in Pakistan through our teams. Quite a few entrepreneurs here in the US have volunteered, and what we'd like to see is, if not maybe a massive effort, maybe a coordinated, but not just ad hoc, but at least coordinated effort of people who actually have boots in Pakistan to volunteer those boots to you in an organized manner. And while I'm on that subject, maybe I'll throw in one more set of boots. This is a war. So this has to be taken care of at the war footing. And we have a very organized war machine. Are you taking any help from the military at all?
Yes. So this is, if I can offer an objective perspective, and if you can consider it objective, I haven't seen federal plus military plus intelligence, and actually in most cases provincial governments come together the way they have in the last 6 weeks ever before. So there is, just to give you guys some context, there is now a what's called the National Command and Operating Center that meets every morning at 10, 7 days a week. It's chaired by Asad Umar and a 3-star general who's been assigned to this full time, and literally, and again, and it's not just a health focused operating center. This, covers things like food security, agriculture, industries, commerce, basically all aspects that are which is pretty much every aspect of the economy and the country that's getting impacted. So everyone, the ministers, secretaries, a bunch of us that are working on various initiatives actually come together every day. And we've been doing this now for, I want to say, the past 6 weeks. And we've gotten better, and again, every day sort of new things are decided. This is meant to be like an operating plus decision-making body. So there is a lot of help being provided. I mean, the example that Khurram was giving you earlier on improving data accuracy, we actually got help from the military when it came down to actually getting the 40 labs around the country to start entering data into a central system, which we tried doing that by sending letters and it just wasn't working. And ultimately we had to go down that route. And this is just one example, but it's happened across lots of different fronts. So it is definitely a very, very combined, cohesive effort, at least as far as I can tell.
All right. I think one of the questions was about what's an API. I think you can give a quick, maybe if I may, it's just application programmer interface. It's a language that speaks to, that multiple programs can speak to each other without getting in the way. So we'll leave it at that. I think there's enough write-up and there are enough techies out there who can explain that to all the doctors who are requesting information. Speaking of doctors, we do have multiple voluntary or companies that have basically are in this area. They could really help. They have their call centers in Pakistan. We can take this offline later on if you like, but tell the audience how you would be able to work with those who are already in Pakistan working on COVID-19 and have tools and technologies that they can give you without any cost. So it really a fundamental contribution that they could make.
So there are a number of different things that we've been doing. There's been a very large influx of help from various health tech companies, from doctors who want to volunteer their time. So we've sort of broken it up into two separate categories. One is basically people who, so doctors who want to give time and are able to do things like basic consultations on doing telehealth. So there is a telehealth portal that has just gotten announced about 2 days ago, where we're currently building doctor supply. And the reason it takes a little bit of time is we actually need to go in and validate PMDC numbers and make sure it ties back to their CNICs. Otherwise, you get all kinds of people signing up. So that is now live. So my one specific ask there is whether you are a doctor in Pakistan or you're a doctor abroad. The process for doctors abroad is slightly different in terms of validation, but we actually have both options available now. You can actually sign up. We will validate your credentials, and in a few days, we're launching a WhatsApp-based mechanism to connect doctors who are available to provide consultations and patients who want a consultation in Pakistan. So that should be going live in the next few days. So that's one sort of area, and this is just about giving time. Ideally, the sort of longer-term vision is to move away from not just doing COVID consultations, but actually to be able to offer things like, consultations on mental health, etc. But that's a whole other sort of category that we need to figure out. We need to figure out the SOPs for that, etc. But we're starting off with what we think is an easier set of SOPs that, a doctor can talk to a patient about and at least make some reasonable diagnosis of. The second area is health tech. So basically, we've had a number of companies come up to say, hey, we've got this EMR system, or we've got this sort of system that can be deployed given that OPDs are closed. What we've been doing there is just because of the amount of information that's been coming through, we have somebody on the team that's been, anyone who's coming in, we're essentially keeping a running tab of the type of technology that can be offered, what it can do, how quickly it can be deployed, what the cost is, or a lot of people have agreed to make that technology available for free. So we're in the process of sort of understanding what the available options are. If there are people here who have something to offer in that specific area, what I would request is either Farhan through you, if it's possible to get, we can share with you what we've been doing right now. It's been relatively informal. But if there's a way for you to formally collect those, we'll definitely get somebody on our end to engage. Just so that we need to get ourselves to a point where we can say we're ready to roll this out. We're not there yet just because we've been in evaluation mode. So those are sort of the two areas otherwise. Is there anything else, Aidrus, that you were thinking of, particularly related to the doctor community?
Yeah, we have one specific group of people that actually do have all the infrastructure that you need currently in Pakistan on the ground working. So we would take that offline from here. And Farhan, you can now get on questions that you have from the audience, please.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Tania, and thank you, Khurram. That was very insightful. A lot of useful information. I know getting job done in Pakistan, it's not that easy. The way our infrastructure, the bureaucratic structure has been set up. have, most of us have lived in Pakistan for most of our lives, and growing up in Pakistan, we have seen that happen firsthand. So kudos to all the amazing work you and Khurram are doing, and many other Pakistanis trying to solve some of the most critical issues of our time, because there is a general consensus amongst all of us that if we don't do it right now, it might be too late, because right now is the time to build those building blocks. May that be in healthcare, may that be in digital strategy. This is the time as we are scaling up. So thank you for the amazing work that you're doing. So we have received many questions in many areas, starting from oversight, governance, technology. I'm going to try to focus some that I found very interesting. For all of our audiences, please type in your questions in the Q&A window. I have stopped the chat window because there were too many questions coming up too fast. I've tried to isolate as many as I could. The Q&A chat session is a little bit more structured, gives us an opportunity to have more focused questions answered. One of the questions that came up with, are we heading towards public cloud offering or private cloud? Any plan to lure international companies to invest in data centers in Pakistan like Azure or GCP?
I think the short answer to that is it's far harder to lure these companies to Pakistan than most of us imagine. We have been in conversation with a number of companies. It's just classic case of prioritization. We tend to be far lower on the priority list for most of these companies, and it's largely a business case issue. I do think that as the conversation changes here locally, and I think we need to do a better sales job there, to be honest, because ultimately it's, you can sort of remain in the vicious cycle of there isn't enough of an opportunity, but the opportunity won't get created if you go down that route. There's a lot of education on the ground that needs to happen for people to understand. When you use the word cloud, it gets all kinds of reactions, even in the tech communities within the government. So I think actually the way I see our role in the short term is actually to help create that awareness, because we seem to be stuck in a mode that we really need to get out of very rapidly. And there are certain policies around how to deploy tech right now that actually make it incredibly difficult to do things. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. This squarely falls within the IT ministry's remit, and that is that's a ministry that we try to work with very closely. We don't always have the type of luck there that we would like to, but it is something that we do need to work on. I 110% agree with the comment.
Okay. I think most of the people are interested in knowing how they can contribute, and I think you have answered that question as well. There was an interesting comment that came on basically asking, is there a venue? I would like to know if there are any plans to arrange workshop or discuss potential ideas. So basically people are looking for venues. If they have ideas, or if they have products, or if they have some strategy on partner, or if they would just simply like to partner, what would be the ideal venue, and how should they go about doing it?
Yeah, again, I mean, this is one that I'll take complete responsibility of failing at this. We had thought when we were starting off that we would set up an email, and we'd sort of be able to be super responsive on that email and get back to people. I think what ended up happening was that the response was so overwhelming that we haven't been able to keep up with it. And despite the fact that we ended up needing to find somebody who was literally full-time trying to man and take care of this email. But I think we need a better mechanism to both ingest ideas, but then also respond to them and sort of organize and structure them effectively. and I think again, this is maybe something Khurram, you and I should take this offline. If people on the call have ideas on how to help or are open to helping us think about how to both set up the system to ingest the ideas and actually go through them, then it becomes a lot easier for us to just be like, do one call a week to just go, set 30 minutes, go through a bunch of stuff. I think that's the level of organization we need to get to, which again, I'll be totally honest, we haven't been able to get to that yet.
And just to sort of add to Tania, I think what Tania is saying, just to share some of the mechanisms we were thinking about, right, for this, there is an intention to create sort of a network of volunteers, which is a digital network where you can register and then be part of online discourse. The plan was to launch that in April. That plan was in February, March, and then, like I said, COVID-19 happened. I'd be lying if I said that we're 1 or 2 months away from that, to be honest, just because really all of our energies are focused on tackling this rather large crisis. But at some point, at least the way we were envisioning it, was that you'd have this online community and you'd have an ability for anyone to share an idea or thought and let the community sort of crowd vote on what ideas need deeper discussion and evaluation, and set up monthly calls where you could actually, the person who came up with the idea come and present to the community. We could discuss and figure out how we can take it forward. I think in the medium term, that is still something we want to do. But Tania, fully agree with you. I think we have to come up with a solution in the short term as well, to sort of make sure we're responding to these the ideas that are coming in.
Sure. Somebody sent a really interesting one. Do you see SARS and the COVID-19 crisis as an opportunity to advocate for more comprehensive and inclusive new census strategy?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a phenomenal question. And I was 3 days ago, I was sitting at the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. And I realized after going and sitting there that I should have gone 3 months earlier, because sort of contrary to what the view may be on the outside, there is a lot of interesting data being collected. Not all of it is digital, though they are moving towards digital. The last census, as you know, was in 2017. Unfortunately, due to a bunch of political reasons, the census never really got released. But interestingly enough, having looked at what they have been able to do, there is a lot of pretty phenomenal data which brings it down to, so even in the context of COVID, just to give you an example, one of the problems actually the reason why I went to visit was the problem I was trying to solve was how can we get to a granular level of sort of population or geographical area where we understand population density, and then we can sort of use that as a layer, map on the number of confirmed cases that are happening in that particular block, so that we can move towards doing lockdowns in a more targeted fashion. And interestingly enough, they have data down to what they call the block level. So block is about 200 to 250 households. And for those households, not only do they've actually digitized all of that, but they have, as you sort of hover over that particular area, you can see total number of people, you can see ages, you can see gender, you can even, so you can actually get pretty granular data where if you're trying to plan for something like this, where you want to move towards doing lockdowns in a more sort of strategic way, in a more targeted way, it's actually quite valuable. I think the problem is it just doesn't get talked about, it doesn't get used. So there's a bunch of really valuable stuff that's sitting somewhere on the side. So actually I very much agree with whoever asked the question, that I think it's a huge opportunity for us to go and figure out what it is that they have, what it is that can be used. They were very, very open and willing to share what can be used for the crisis, but also what can be used otherwise. So I absolutely, in fact, I mentioned this to Khurram and the rest of the team, that I sort of went there and came back and, for a second, just like wanted to kick myself for not having done it earlier. So there is something that we will be spending definitely a lot more time on, because I think it's a treasure trove and one that we need to figure out how to use better.
Tania, I have a question for you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
A lot of people have, have asked, this government has been around for 15 months, or now it's almost going to be 2 years in about a couple of months. And it seems like the progress is slow. Could you comment a little bit of your experiences? I mean, we talk about DC being a swamp in the US. Imagine what kind of swamp Islamabad might be. But could you talk about how the success you've had because of some of the sponsors you've had and how they've helped you get to this point, which may have seemed impossible a couple of years ago?
So, I hear this. I hear this criticism very often, and I hear it about the government overall. I also hear it for sort of us and our effort, and I'll be totally honest. And the response is not meant to be defensive at all. I think it's just one of my biggest learnings in the past few months has been just how hard it is this is like a massive vessel in the sea, and when you're trying to turn, just change direction and steer the ship in a different way, it takes a fair amount of effort and time to start even actually moving it till you can see that it's moving in a certain direction. And I can tell you that a lot of us, Joe, I'll be the first one to raise my hand. I have zero experience working in the government, in any government, Pakistan or outside. And while I may understand the private sector in Pakistan a little bit, it's understanding bureaucracy and how to deal with them and how to work with them and how to work through them in an environment where everyone's worried about signing their name anywhere. Understanding political dynamics and sort of the existence of camps, this camp or that camp, and sort of navigating through that, while keeping an eye on the target and having clear KPIs and delivering. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do, and definitely the hardest thing that I've had to do in my life. And what I can also tell you is there is the lack of results is not due to lack of intent. And then of course people will say intent isn't enough, right? Execution matters. The amount of work that I see being put by a number of senior people in the federal and the provincial governments has certainly surprised me. I didn't, just the impression of the government had always been, log aate hain, sorry, I'm going to move into Urdu, but samosa kha ke 4 baje tak nikal jate hain sab log. That's just not what my experience has been at all. People here, there hasn't been a single weekend where, frankly, people haven't been working, particularly in the last 2 months, but also otherwise. The Prime Minister himself works incredibly hard throughout the weekend. I think the challenge for a lot of us is figuring out these sort of, various means of getting work done in the government. And I think that takes time. It's not something that, for those of us who haven't done it before, comes very naturally, and we're learning. I think having, your second part of your question was having champions and advocates. Again, I think for somebody like me that is a complete outsider and not politically connected in any way, I think it's frankly next to impossible for me to survive unless I have sponsorship, and not just sponsorship of one person, and not just having the Prime Minister saying, hey, I'll back you, but actually having sponsorship across a number of different sort of senior political figures, but also actually having senior bureaucrats who have managed to get work done in this government and before. Having them be allies and actually help us understand, and by the way, that has happened. So the fact that we are able to make progress on getting technical assistance from donors, so whether it's World Bank or DFID, I have never, frankly, I didn't even know how the donor grant process worked till two or 3 months ago. So there's a whole other muscle that we've learned how to flex, and it's something that actually our bureaucracy knows how to do quite well. I think this is no different from what I've actually found working in the private sector for many years in the US as well, that you need allies and you need sponsors to get anywhere. And I think that it's frankly never been more true than it has been for me over the past few months. I do, however, will say part of the reason we've set up the foundation outside the government is a realization that I came to very quickly was that getting strong quality human resource into the government is incredibly difficult, and keeping them motivated and keeping them going when they're not getting paid at 1/10 the level that they should be, when they're constantly having to deal with bureaucracy and politics. So the idea of sort of putting the structure on the side was, let's create a mechanism where you can, where people sort of who are like-minded and who are working for the cause rather than working for, personal gain, can come together, keep themselves sane, because you are the sum of the average around you. And good people will attract other good people. So a large part of the effort and the strategy behind sort of creating the setup to be this way, and I mean, of course, look, time will tell whether this setup will fail or succeed. But we do feel sort of strongly about the fact that just the types of people that we've been able to talk to and attract, and lots of people are in the process of leaving and coming back. So over the next few months, we feel very good about building a small but very, very, very strong team, which you don't see that many of when you look at Pakistan. So I think that the people will ultimately be what will make the difference, and so I feel very, very strongly about that.
If I could just add to that, on the structure side.
All right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just saying, Aidrus, that the structure that Tania is talking about, this private sector foundation with someone in running digital on the project on the government side. This is, by the way, is not an original sort of structure that Tania and I have sort of come up with or concocted. This is a structure that was pioneered in a bunch of other countries. Right now, India is using the same structure. The NGO on the Indian side is known as iSpirit. The person within government is Nandan Nilekani, the founder of Infosys. He actually started this initiative under the Manmohan Singh government, and for the last 8 to 10 years has actually been driving it forward. Bangladesh is doing something very similar. The foundation on that end is called A2I, and working then with a counterpart within government as well. So you look at Thailand. Thailand has someone who's actually essentially the father of all the tech work that's going on, and he has the ability to bring everyone to a table and get sign off from all the banks as and when required to build a new ID system, for example. So it's not in my view, it's not as risky as one might imagine, because we've seen it work repeatedly in driving tech interventions in government, and we're confident we'll be able to do it in Pakistan as well, inshallah.
All right. Thank you very much, Tania. Thank you, Khurram. We're coming up to on 90 minutes. There are a lot of other questions and comments and things that are coming in. Hopefully, we would all benefit from today's session, and we would keep sending our information. Farhan, is it okay if people who are signed up today send information to open through you, and then maybe you can aggregate them and submit them to the team? In the end, Tania, I would suggest you tell the government and the army and the military and everybody that, let's start calling it BJP virus and go after it. Your sponsors obviously are very strong in the government as well, working behind the scene. Also, I'm sure I speak for most Pakistanis outside of Pakistan, do give our thanks to the organizations and the foundations that are helping you. I just saw Hussein Dawood and Bill Gates have signed a memo for a large amount of funding and support. There is Risk Foundation in Lahore. There is obviously Sailani and Chipa and all these groups in Karachi that are feeding people. Do send do give them our thanks, convey our thanks to them from the expatriates all around the globe. And thank you very much. And hopefully we would continue doing this series every month, if not every quarter, if not every month.
Thank you so much for having us. We spent far more time talking than answering questions, so I apologize for that. But look, please, this is, I mentioned this in the beginning, open is family in many ways for me. So please, keep the questions and ideas coming. And, if we ever want to hop back on to do more of a idea generation session, we'd love to do that.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Farhan,
any last words?
Khurram, I think he's asking you if you have any last words.
Oh, sorry. No, thanks. Thank you, Aidrus and Farhan, also for the time, and everyone who's dialed in. Everything we've done has been a function of really a bunch of volunteers in Pakistan, in Islamabad, overseas. And I just want to take a moment to just appreciate all the work that everyone's putting in. There's so many organizations that, if I start naming them, I don't think I'll remember half of them. So I just want to take a minute to thank everyone that's contributed. And it's just the beginning, and really, really looking forward to continuing to work with Tania and with all the volunteers and private sector organizations to, drive change in Pakistan, inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khurram. Thank you so much, Tania, Aidrus. And we will have a copy of this webinar posted on our Open Silicon Valley website. And if you have any questions that you would like to share with Tania and Khurram, please email them to opensv@gmail.com. Pretty simple email, easy to remember, opensv@gmail.com, and we'll make sure that we will route them to Tania and Khurram. And once again, we truly appreciate both to Tania and Khurram for the amazing work they're doing. It's by no means it's easy. By no means it's short. It's a long-term vision, and the strategy and the execution of that strategy is what is going to define the ultimate success criteria, the success goals of this particular project. So thank you so much. We loved having you at our webinar, and we'll look forward to many more to come in coming years. Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.